The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the weathered wooden building, and Sophia Zimmerman pressed her gloved hand against the frosted window, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air as she stared out at what would become her new home in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in the winter of 1878. She had traveled 2,000 miles from Philadelphia to marry a man she had never met, answering an advertisement placed by Jacob Ortega, a cattle rancher who claimed to need a wife to help him run his homestead. The journey had taken 3 grueling weeks, and now as the driver opened the door and snow swirled into the coach, Sophia felt her courage falter. The temperature had dropped dramatically as they approached the high desert territory, and an unusual blizzard had swept through the region, blanketing everything in white. The driver, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth, helped her down onto the icy platform. "This here is as far as I go, miss," he said, already unloading her trunk from the back. "The Ortega Ranch is about 5 miles northwest, but with this storm you will not make it tonight. Best find somewhere to wait it out." Sophia pulled her wool cloak tighter around her shoulders, her dark hair whipping across her face. She was 22 years old, and until 3 months ago she had been a seamstress in her father's shop. When her father died suddenly, leaving her with nothing but debts, she had few options. Marriage to a stranger in the West seemed preferable to the workhouse, or worse. Now, standing in the bitter cold with night falling fast, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The stagecoach pulled away, leaving her alone on the deserted street. Most of the buildings were dark, their occupants sensibly sheltering from the storm. Sophia picked up her carpet bag, leaving the trunk where it sat, and started walking toward the only building with light glowing in its windows. A painted sign announced it as the Lucky Star Saloon. She hesitated at the door. Respectable women did not enter saloons, but her fingers were already numb despite her gloves, and she could not feel her toes inside her leather boots. The choice between propriety and survival was not difficult. She pushed through the door into a wall of warmth and noise. The conversation died almost immediately as every head turned to look at her. Sophia stood in the doorway, snow melting on her shoulders, and met the curious stares of 24 men with as much dignity as she could muster. A heavy-set man behind the bar recovered first. "Well now," he said, wiping his hands on his apron, "you look like you're about frozen solid, miss. Come on in and warm yourself." Sophia moved toward the fire burning in a large stone hearth at the far end of the room. The conversations gradually resumed, though she felt eyes on her as she held her hands toward the flames. Her fingers burned as feeling returned to them. "You that mail-order bride old Jacob Ortega sent for?" The bartender had followed her, carrying a tin cup of something steaming. "Yes," Sophia said, accepting the cup gratefully. The liquid was coffee, strong and bitter, but wonderfully hot. "I was supposed to meet him here, but the driver said the ranch is too far in this weather." "Driver was right about that," the bartender said. "This storm came out of nowhere. We do not usually get weather like this in Albuquerque, even in winter. You picked a hell of a time to arrive, if you will pardon my language." "Is there a hotel or a boarding house?" The bartender scratched his jaw. "There is, but Mrs. Henderson closed up for the winter. Her daughter had a baby up in Santa Fe, and she went to help out. One not be back until spring." Sophia felt panic rising in her chest. "Then where am I supposed to stay?" "That is a good question." The bartender looked around the room. "Any of you boys know where this young lady can shelter tonight?" The men avoided his gaze, suddenly very interested in their drinks. Sophia understood. A single woman staying under the roof of any of these men would cause scandal, and she would arrive at her future husband's ranch with her reputation in tatters. "She can stay at my place." The voice came from a table near the fire. Sophia turned to see a man rising from his chair. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of slate. He wore worn denim trousers, scuffed boots, and a leather vest over a flannel shirt. A revolver hung at his hip. "Now, James, I do not think that is appropriate," the bartender began. "I'm not suggesting anything improper, Dutch," the man said. His voice was quiet but carried authority. My cabin is about a mile from here. It has got 2 rooms. She can have the bedroom, and I will sleep by the fire. Come morning, when this storm breaks, I will take her out to the Ortega place myself." "You are assuming the storm will break by morning," Dutch said. "Then I will keep the fire going until it does," James replied. His eyes met Sophia's. "You will be perfectly safe, miss. You have my word." Sophia studied him carefully. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with a weathered face that suggested he spent most of his time outdoors. There was something honest in his expression, and she had learned to read men during her years in her father's shop, measuring them for suits while they talked. She had developed an instinct for character. "Thank you," she said. "I accept your offer." A murmur went through the room, but James ignored it. "Do you have luggage?" "A trunk at the stage depot in this bag." "We will get the trunk tomorrow. Bring the bag." He walked to the bar and placed coins on the scarred wood. "For the coffee, Dutch." "James, you sure about this?" Dutch asked in a low voice. "I am sure," James said. He led Sophia to the door, pausing only to take a heavy coat from a hook on the wall and drape it over her shoulders. It smelled of leather and wood smoke and something else, something masculine and not unpleasant. They stepped out into the storm. The wind had picked up, driving snow into their faces. James took her bag and offered his other arm. Sophia gripped it, grateful for his steadiness as they made their way through drifts that reached her knees. The cold was brutal, stealing her breath. She could barely see 3 feet in front of her. "How do you know where you're going?" she shouted over the wind. "I have walked this path 1,000 times, he called back. "Just hold on." It seemed to take forever, but finally she saw a dark shape looming out of the white. James pushed open a door and they stumbled inside. He quickly closed the door behind them, shutting out the howling wind. The cabin was dark and cold. James struck a match, and Sophia saw a single large room with a fireplace, a small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, and a door that presumably led to the bedroom he had mentioned. He lit a lantern, then moved to the fireplace and began building a fire. Sophia stood shivering, watching as he worked with practiced efficiency. He arranged kindling, struck another match, and soon had flames licking at the wood. He added larger pieces, and within minutes a cheerful blaze was crackling. "That coat is soaked," he said, still kneeling by the fire. "You should take it off before you catch your death." Sophia removed his coat and then her own cloak. Her dress was damp around the hem, and her boots were sodden. James stood and moved to a chest in the corner, pulling out a thick wool blanket. "Here," he said, offering it to her. "Wrap this around yourself and sit by the fire. I will make something hot to drink." She did as he suggested, settling into a wooden rocking chair positioned near the hearth. The blanket was soft and smelled clean. She watched as James filled a pot with water from a bucket and hung it over the fire on an iron hook. He moved with quiet competence, and she found herself wondering about him. "You are very kind to help me," she said. "It is nothing," he replied. "Nobody should be out in weather like this." "The bartender called you James." "James Ortega," he said, and her heart skipped a beat. "Ortega? Then you are related to Jacob Ortega?" "He is my father." James added coffee grounds to the pot, not looking at her. "I suppose I should have mentioned that in the saloon, but I wanted to get you somewhere warm." Sophia pulled the blanket tighter. "Why did not you tell me?" "Would it have changed your decision?" She considered this. "I do not know. Perhaps. That is why I did not say anything." He finally met her eyes. "Look, I know this is awkward, but my father's ranch is the biggest spread in the territory. The main house has plenty of room. You would have had your own quarters there anyway, at least until the wedding. This is not so different." "Except that we are alone in a cabin in the middle of a blizzard," Sophia pointed out. "Except for that," he agreed. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "But I meant what I said. You will be safe. I will sleep out here by the fire, and you can bolt the bedroom door if it makes you feel better." The water began to boil, and he poured it into 2 tin cups, adding the coffee grounds to steep. He brought one to her, and their fingers brushed as she took it. Even through that brief contact, she felt something, a spark that made her pull back quickly. "Thank you," she murmured. He returned to the fire and stood with his back to it, holding his own cup. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with unspoken questions. "Why did your father send for a bride?" Sophia finally asked. "Surely there are women in Albuquerque who would marry him." "My father is 56 years old," James said carefully. "His first wife, my mother, died when I was 10. He never remarried. Now he is getting older, and the ranch is getting harder to manage. He wants someone to help run the household, and I think he wants grandchildren before he is too old to enjoy them." "And what about you?" The question came out before she could stop it. "Do you live at the ranch?" "I have a small spread of my own about 10 miles west," he said, "and cattle, mostly. I built this cabin in town so I would have a place to stay when I needed supplies or wanted to avoid a long ride. I was at the saloon tonight because I was supposed to meet my father there. He was going to introduce me to his intended." Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "Then you knew who I was." "Not until you said you were the mail order bride," he admitted. "My father only told me her name was Sophia and that she was from Philadelphia. I do not think he mentioned what you looked like." "What did you think when you realized who I was?" James was quiet for a long moment. "I thought my father was a lucky man," he said finally, his voice low. The words hung in the air between them. Sophia found she could not look away from his eyes, gray and serious in the firelight. She had expected her future husband to be old, perhaps rough or unkind. She had steeled herself for a marriage of convenience, nothing more. But she had not expected this pull toward a man who was not the one she had traveled 2,000 miles to marry. "I should check the bedroom," James said abruptly, breaking the moment. "Make sure there are blankets on the bed." He disappeared through the door, and Sophia released a breath she had not realized she was holding. This was dangerous. She was engaged to this man's father, and she could not afford to jeopardize her future based on a few moments of attraction. She needed the security that marriage to Jacob Ortega would provide. She could not return to Philadelphia with nothing. James returned. "Everything is ready. You should probably get some sleep. It has been a long day for you." "What about you?" she asked. "I will keep the fire going. Like I said, I will be fine out here." Sophia stood, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. "James, I want you to know that I appreciate what you are doing. Not just offering me shelter, but being honorable about it." "Any decent man would do the same," he said. "In my experience, decent men are rarer than you might think." She moved toward the bedroom, pausing at the door. "Good night, James." "Good night, Sophia." She closed the door and stood in the darkness for a moment before setting the lantern James had given her on a small table. The room was simple, containing only a bed, a washstand, and a trunk. She could hear the storm raging outside and the crackle of the fire in the other room. She removed her damp dress and hung it over the back of a chair, hoping it would dry by morning. In her chemise and petticoat, she climbed into the bed and pulled the quilts up to her chin. The sheets were cold, and despite the fire in the other room, she shivered. Sleep would not come. She lay in the darkness, listening to the storm and thinking about the man on the other side of the door. She thought about Jacob Ortega, the man she was supposed to marry, and wondered what he was like. Would he be kind? Would he treat her well? And why did the thought of marrying him suddenly fill her with dread when it had not before? "Because you did not know his son existed," a voice in her head whispered. She turned over, punching the pillow in frustration. This was ridiculous. She had known James Ortega for all of 2 hours. She knew nothing about him except that he owned cattle and built a good fire. This attraction was nothing more than nerves and exhaustion and the strange intimacy of their circumstances. But even as she told herself this, she knew it was not entirely true. There had been something in the way he looked at her, something in the quiet strength of his presence that called to something deep inside her. She had felt safer with him in the past 2 hours than she had felt in months, perhaps years. A sound from the other room made her sit up. It came again, a dull thud followed by the scrape of wood on wood. She climbed out of bed and cracked open the door. James was feeding more wood to the fire. He had removed his vest and rolled up his sleeves, and in the firelight she could see the muscles in his forearms as he worked. He must have sensed her watching because he turned. "Is something wrong?" he asked Chardemont. "I heard a noise. I wanted to make sure everything was all right." "Just building up the fire. It is going to be a long night." Sophia stepped into the room, still wrapped in one of the quilts from the bed. "You should try to sleep. You will exhaust yourself staying up all night." "I will be fine," he said. "I have done it before." "When?" "Roundups. When we drive the cattle to market, sometimes we take shifts watching for rustlers or wolves. You learn to get by on a few hours of sleep." Sophia moved closer to the fire, and James stepped back, giving her space. She held her hands toward the flames. "Tell me about the ranch, about what my life will be like there." James settled into the other chair, the one he had presumably been sitting in before she interrupted him. "It is a good spread. The house is adobe, built around a courtyard. Cool in summer, warm in winter. There are about 40 head of cattle, a dozen horses. My father employs 6 ranch hands, and there is a woman, Mrs. Garcia, who comes in 3 times a week to help with the cooking and cleaning." "What is your father like?" James was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "He is a hard man, but fair. He built the ranch from nothing, starting with 100 acres and a dozen cattle 30 years ago. He worked every day of his life to make it what it is. He expects people to pull their weight, but he rewards loyalty." "Is he kind?" "In his way," James said. "He is not cruel, if that is what you are asking, but he is not affectionate either. I cannot remember him ever telling me he loved me, though I know he does. He shows it by teaching, by making sure I had everything I needed. That is just how he is." Sophia absorbed this. It was more or less what she had expected. Men like Jacob Ortega did not send for mail order brides because they were looking for romance. They wanted practical partnerships. "What about your mother?" she asked. "What was she like?" James's expression softened. "She was beautiful, not just in looks, though she was that too. She had this way of making everyone around her feel special. She could gentle a wild horse with just her voice, and she made the best tortillas in the territory. She would sing while she worked, these old Spanish songs her grandmother taught her." "You must miss her terribly." "Every day," he said. "She got pneumonia one winter, and it just took her so fast. 1 week she was fine, and the next she was gone. My father, he just shut down after that, threw himself into the ranch and never looked back." "That must have been hard for you. You were just a boy." 10 years old, James confirmed. Old enough to remember everything, but too young to really understand why she was not coming back. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire. Sophia felt a strange peace settling over her despite the storm raging outside and the complicated situation she found herself in. There was something about James that made her feel like she could be herself, like she did not have to pretend or perform. "Can I ask you something?" James said. "Of course." "Why did you answer my father's advertisement? A woman like you could have found a husband in Philadelphia, I'm sure." Sophia pulled the quilt tighter. "After my father died, I discovered he had debts I never knew about. The shop had been losing money for years, and he had borrowed from everyone he could to keep it going. When he died, the creditors came calling. They took the shop, the house, everything. I had nowhere to go and no skills except sewing. You could have found work as a seamstress." "I tried," she said, "but there are 100 seamstresses in Philadelphia for every job available. The positions that existed paid barely enough to afford a room in a boarding house, let alone food. And then there are men who think a woman alone is fair game for their attentions." "Someone hurt you?" James's voice had gone hard. "Nothing terrible," Sophia assured him quickly, "but enough to make me realize that I needed to leave, to start fresh somewhere new. When I saw your father's advertisement, it seemed like an answer to a prayer. Security, a home, a chance to build a new life. And now that you are here?" "Now I am here," she repeated, not answering the question because she did not know how. Now that she was here, everything felt more complicated than she had imagined. You do not have to marry him, James said suddenly. I have some money saved, enough to get you back to Philadelphia if that is what you want, or to help you start over somewhere else. Sophia stared at him. Why would you do that? I am a stranger to you. Because I do not think you should marry someone unless you truly want to, he said, and I can see in your eyes that you are having doubts. Your father is expecting me. I made a commitment. My father will survive, James said. He always does. But if you marry him for the wrong reasons, you will both be miserable. What are the right reasons? Sophia asked. James met her eyes. I think you know. The air between them felt charged, electric. Sophia's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. She wanted to stand up, to close the distance between them, to touch him and see if this connection she felt was real. But she could not. He was her future husband's son. This was impossible. I should go back to bed, she said, standing abruptly. James stood as well. Sophia, I did not mean to upset you. You did not, she said. I'm just tired. She fled to the bedroom and closed the door, leaning against it as she tried to catch her breath. What was happening to her? She had always been practical, sensible. She did not believe in love at first sight or romantic nonsense, yet here she was feeling things for a man she barely knew, a man she could not have. She climbed back into bed, but sleep was even more elusive than before. She lay awake, listening to the sounds of James moving around in the other room, adding wood to the fire, settling into the chair. She imagined him sitting there all night keeping watch, keeping her safe and warm. The hours crept by. At some point, the sound of the storm began to lessen. The howling wind quieted to a murmur, and the rattle of snow against the windows stopped. Sophia finally drifted into an uneasy sleep filled with confusing dreams. She woke to sunlight streaming through the small window. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and then it all came flooding back. She sat up quickly and looked around for her dress. It had dried during the night, though it was wrinkled beyond belief. She put it on anyway, finger-combing her hair into some semblance of order. When she opened the bedroom door, she found James asleep in the rocking chair, his head tilted back and his long legs stretched toward the fire, which had burned down to glowing embers. He looked exhausted, his face relaxed in sleep, younger somehow. She stood watching him for a moment, memorizing the sight of him because she knew this was likely the last time she would see him like this, vulnerable and unguarded. She moved quietly to the door and opened it, gasping at what she saw. The world had been transformed into a pristine landscape of white. Snow covered everything. The roofs of distant buildings, the street, the mountains in the distance. The sky was a brilliant blue, and the sun sparkled off the snow like diamonds. Beautiful, is it not? She turned to find James awake, watching her. It is, she agreed. I've never seen anything like it. This is unusual for Albuquerque, he said, standing and stretching. She heard his joints crack. We get some snow most winters, but nothing like this. Must be 3 feet in some places. Will we be able to get to the ranch? I will saddle my horse, he said. You can ride in front of me. It will be slow going, but we should make it by afternoon. The practical words brought reality crashing back. Today she would meet Jacob Ortega, the man she had agreed to marry. Today her new life would truly begin. I should get your trunk from the depot first, James added. Get you some breakfast, too. You must be starving. Sophia realized she was hungry. She had not eaten since yesterday at noon when the stage had stopped briefly at a way station. That would be wonderful, she said. James pulled on his coat and hat. Stay here where it is warm. I will be back within the hour. After he left, Sophia took the opportunity to wash her face and hands with water from the basin, though it was ice cold. She tried to tame her hair, which was a disaster without a brush. She felt grimy and disheveled, hardly fit to meet her future husband. True to his word, James returned within the hour, carrying her trunk on one shoulder and a basket in his other hand. He set the trunk down with a thump. Mrs. Chen at the restaurant sent this, he said, placing the basket on the table. She packed enough food for an army. Inside the basket, Sophia found fresh bread, butter, cold ham, boiled eggs, and even a jar of preserves. They ate together at the small table, and it felt strangely domestic, like they were an old married couple sharing breakfast. The thought made her chest ache. I need to tell you something, James said, setting down his coffee cup. Before we get to the ranch. What is it? My father does not know I spent the night alone with you in this cabin. As far as anyone needs to know, you stayed at the saloon last night, and I'm just escorting you to the ranch this morning as a favor. You mean we should lie, Sophia said. I mean we should protect your reputation, James corrected. Nothing happened between us, but people will talk. They always do. If my father thinks there was any impropriety, he might call off the engagement. Then where would you be? He was right, of course. The practical thing to do was to keep last night a secret. But Sophia hated the idea of starting her marriage with a lie, even a lie of omission. What if I told him the truth, she asked. What if I explained that you were a perfect gentleman and that nothing inappropriate happened? He might believe you, James said. Or he might not. Do you want to take that chance? Sophia thought about returning to Philadelphia with nothing, about trying to survive on the streets or in a workhouse. She thought about the desperation that had driven her to answer that advertisement in the first place. No, she said quietly, I cannot take that chance. Then we agree. As far as anyone knows, you sheltered in the saloon, and I'm just being neighborly by taking you out to the ranch. After they finished eating, Sophia changed into a fresh dress from her trunk, a dark blue wool that was more practical for riding. James waited outside while she dressed, then helped her onto his horse, a sturdy bay gelding. He swung up behind her, and she felt the solid warmth of his body against her back, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. The ride to the ranch was slow and difficult, the horse plunging through deep drifts. Sophia clung to the saddle horn, acutely aware of every place where her body touched James's. He did not speak much during the journey, concentrating on guiding the horse safely. She was grateful for the silence because she did not trust herself to make conversation. The Ortega ranch appeared after nearly 3 hours of riding. The house was just as James had described it, a sprawling adobe structure built around a central courtyard. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys, and she could see outbuildings scattered around the property, barns and corrals and storage sheds. As they approached, a man emerged from the house. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair and a weathered face. He wore a sheepskin coat and carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. That is my father, James said quietly. Jacob Ortega watched them approach, his expression unreadable. James brought the horse to a halt and dismounted, then reached up to help Sophia down. His hands were strong on her waist, and for just a moment their eyes met. She saw regret there, and something else, something that made her breath catch. Then he released her and stepped back. Father, this is Sophia Zimmerman, he said formally. Miss Zimmerman, my father, Jacob Ortega. Jacob stepped forward, his eyes taking in every detail of her appearance. Sophia stood straight under his scrutiny, meeting his gaze directly. She would not cower or apologize for who she was. Miss Zimmerman, he said finally. His voice was deep and rough. You are younger than I expected. I am 22, she said. My letter stated as much. Yes, it did, he agreed. Forgive an old man's surprise. Welcome to the Ortega ranch. He did not offer to shake her hand or help her into the house. He simply turned and walked toward the door, clearly expecting her to follow. James caught her eye and gave a small nod of encouragement. Sophia picked up her skirts and followed Jacob into the house. The interior was cool and dim after the bright sunlight on snow. The floors were tile, and the furniture was heavy wood and leather. Everything was clean but sparse, functional without being comfortable. This was a man's house, she realized, a place built for work rather than living. Mrs. Garcia will show you to your room, Jacob said, gesturing to a small woman who had appeared from somewhere in the back of the house. You can settle in and we will talk this evening over dinner. Thank you, Sophia said, though she felt dismissed. Mrs. Garcia led her through a series of rooms to a bedroom that opened onto the courtyard. It was simply furnished with a bed, a wardrobe, a washing stand, and a small desk. A window looked out onto a garden that was currently buried in snow. "I will bring hot water for washing," Mrs. Garcia said in accented English. "Dinner is at 6. Do not be late. Mr. Ortega does not like waiting." After the woman left, Sophia sank onto the bed and allowed herself a moment of weakness. She put her face in her hands and tried not to cry. What had she done? She had traveled 2,000 miles to marry a cold, distant man old enough to be her father, and she could not leave because she had nowhere else to go. And worse, she had met a man who made her feel things she had no right to feel, a man who was now forever forbidden to her. A knock on the door made her sit up quickly, wiping her eyes. "Come in," she called. James entered, carrying her trunk. He set it down and closed the door behind him. "I wanted to make sure you were all right," he said. "I am fine," Sophia lied. "You are crying." "No, I am not." But her voice broke on the words, betraying her. James crossed the room in 2 strides and sat beside her on the bed. "Sophia, please, tell me what is wrong." "Everything is wrong," she said, the words pouring out of her. "I made a terrible mistake coming here. Your father is exactly what I feared, cold and harsh. This house is like a tomb. And you have been so kind, and I feel things that I should not feel, and it is all impossible." "What do you feel?" James asked, his voice low and intense. She looked up at him, at his gray eyes so close to hers. "I think you know. I need to hear you say it." "I feel like I have known you my whole life," she whispered. "Like when I am with you, I am finally myself. I feel safe and seen and alive in a way I have never felt before, and it terrifies me because you are not the man I am supposed to want." "Sophia." Her name was a prayer on his lips. He cupped her face with his hand, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized had fallen. "I have been fighting this since the moment you walked into that saloon. I kept telling myself it was wrong, that you were spoken for, but I cannot stop thinking about you." "We cannot," she said, even as she leaned into his touch. "You are his son." "I know." His voice was rough with frustration and longing. "Believe me, I know. But I cannot watch you marry him knowing that you could be happy, that we could be happy together." "What are you saying?" "I am saying run away with me. Come to my ranch. Marry me instead. We will start our own life, and damn the consequences." Sophia wanted nothing more than to say yes, to throw caution and duty to the wind and choose happiness for once in her life. But she could not. "James, if I do that, you will lose your father. He will never forgive either of us." "Maybe not at first," James admitted, "but he will come around eventually. My father is stubborn, but he is not heartless. Once he sees that we truly love each other, he will understand." "Love?" The word hung in the air between them. "Yes, love," James said firmly. "I know it is fast and I know it is crazy, but I am in love with you, Sophia Zimmerman. I think I fell in love with you the moment I saw you standing in that saloon, looking brave and scared at the same time." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I love you too," she said. "God help me, but I do." He kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that sent heat cascading through her body. She kissed him back, pouring all her longing and fear and hope into that single moment of connection. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she felt like she had finally come home. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Come with me," James said, "right now before anyone can stop us. We will ride to my ranch and I will marry you properly as soon as we can find a preacher." Sophia closed her eyes, fighting the war between her heart and her head. Every practical bone in her body screamed that this was reckless and foolish. James's ranch was small compared to his father's, and she would be giving up security for uncertainty, and she would be breaking her promise to Jacob, causing a rift between father and son that might never heal. But her heart knew the truth. She could not marry Jacob when she loved James. It would be a living death for all of them. "Yes," she said, opening her eyes. "Yes, I will come with you." The relief and joy on James's face made her certain she had made the right choice. He kissed her again, quick and fierce. "Pack only what you need. We have to leave now before my father realizes what is happening." They moved quickly and quietly. Sophia repacked her carpet bag with essential items while James kept watch. They slipped out of her room and through the house, avoiding the main rooms where Jacob was likely to be. Sophia's heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. They made it to the barn without being seen. James saddled his horse with swift efficiency, his hands steady despite the urgency. He helped Sophia mount, then swung up behind her. They were just riding out of the barn when a voice stopped them. "Going somewhere?" Jacob stood in the doorway of the barn, blocking their path. His face was like granite, his eyes cold and hard. James reined in the horse. "Father, I can explain," he began. "Can you?" Jacob's voice was dangerously quiet. "Can you explain why you are running off with the woman I sent for? The woman I paid good money to bring here?" "She is not property," James said, his own voice hardening. "She has the right to choose who she wants to marry." "And she chose me," Jacob said. "Or does a contract mean nothing to you?" "It means nothing if she is not happy," James shot back. "Would you really force her to honor a promise she made in desperation? Is that the kind of man you have become?" "Do not lecture me about honor, boy," Jacob snarled. "I have worked my entire life to build this ranch, to create something lasting. I asked for one thing, one partner to help me maintain it, and you are stealing her out from under me." "I am not stealing anyone," James said. "See why Sophia is coming with me of her own free will, and if you cannot accept that, then I am sorry. But I will not apologize for loving her." Jacob's eyes flicked to Sophia for the first time since they had been caught. "Is this true? You are choosing him over me?" Sophia found her voice, though it trembled. "Mr. Ortega, I am truly sorry for any pain this causes you. I never meant to deceive you, but yes, I am choosing James. I love him, and I believe he loves me. Surely you can understand that I cannot marry you knowing that." "Love." Jacob spat the word like a curse. "Love is for fools and dreamers. Marriage is a business arrangement, nothing more. I thought you understood that." "Maybe I did when I left Philadelphia," Sophia said, "but I have learned differently. I deserve more than a business arrangement, and so do you, Mr. Ortega. You deserve someone who can truly be a partner to you, not someone who is settling because she has no other choice." For a long moment, Jacob said nothing. The only sound was the restless stamping of the horse and the distant call of a crow. Sophia held her breath, waiting. Finally, Jacob stepped aside. "Go then," he said. "But understand this, James. If you ride out of here with her, you're choosing her over me. You are choosing your own desires over family loyalty. I will not forgive this easily." "I know," James said quietly, "and I accept that. But I hope in time you will understand why I had to make this choice. I hope you will see that I'm not doing this to hurt you." "That makes it worse, not better," Jacob said. But some of the hardness had left his eyes, replaced by something that might have been sadness. "You have always been my greatest pride and my greatest disappointment, James. You have your mother's soft heart. I had hoped the West would harden you, make you practical." "Mother was not weak because she loved deeply," James said. "She was strong, and she taught me that some things are worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for." Jacob flinched at the mention of his late wife. For just a moment the hard mask slipped, and Sophia saw the grief beneath it, the wound that had never healed. She understood then that Jacob's coldness was not cruelty but armor, a way of protecting himself from more loss. "You should go," Jacob said, turning away, "before I change my mind and horsewhip both of you." James urged the horse forward, and they rode past Jacob without another word. Sophia looked back once to see him standing in the barn doorway, a solitary figure against the white landscape. She felt a pang of guilt and sorrow for what might have been, but also a fierce certainty that she had made the right choice. They rode in silence for several miles, putting distance between themselves and the ranch. Finally, James pulled the horse to a stop on a ridge overlooking a wide valley. In the distance, Sophia could see a smaller house and several outbuildings. "That is my place," James said. "It is not much compared to my father's spread, but it is mine. I built it with my own hands." "It is beautiful," Sophia said, and she meant it. The house looked welcoming, nestled against a hillside with cottonwood trees nearby. "Are you sure about this?" James asked. "Once we go down there, there is no going back. You will be Mrs. James Ortega, and people will talk. Some will say you are a fallen woman. Others will say I stole you. Life will not be easy." Sophia turned in the saddle to look at him directly. "I am sure," she said. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, James Ortega. Whatever comes, we will face it together." He kissed her there on the ridge, with the vast New Mexico sky above them and the promise of home below. When they finally rode down into the valley, Sophia felt like she was riding toward her future, not away from her past. The house was even more charming up close. It was smaller than Jacob's, built of adobe with a peaked roof and a deep porch across the front. Smoke curled from the chimney, and Sophia realized with surprise that someone must be inside. "I have a ranch hand, Miguel, who helps with the cattle," James explained, seeing her expression. "He lives in a small cabin on the other side of the property, but he often comes here during the day. He's probably wondering where I disappeared to." Indeed, a young man emerged from the house as they rode up. He was perhaps 19, with dark hair and curious eyes that widened when he saw Sophia. "Boss, you are back," he said in accented English. "And you brought a lady." "Miguel, this is Sophia Zimmerman," James said, dismounting and helping Sophia down. "She is going to be my wife." Miguel's eyebrows shot up, but he recovered quickly and swept off his hat. "Miss Zimmerman, welcome. I did not know the boss was getting married. He is a sly one, no?" "Very sly," Sophia agreed, smiling despite her nervousness. "Miguel, I need you to do me a favor," James said. "Ride into town and find Reverend Thompson. Tell him I need him to come here as soon as possible. Tomorrow, if he can manage it. You want to get married right away?" Miguel looked between them, clearly trying to piece together the story, but he was too polite to ask questions. "See, boss, I will go now." After Miguel rode off, James led Sophia into the house. The interior was simple but comfortable, with a large main room that served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting room. There were 2 doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms, and a ladder led to a loft space above. "It is not fancy," James said, suddenly seeming uncertain, "but I can build on more rooms if you want, whatever you need to make it feel like home." "James, stop," Sophia said, putting her hand on his arm. "It is perfect. I do not need fancy. I need you." Relief flooded his face, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I was afraid you would regret your choice," he admitted. "Afraid you would see this place and realize you made a mistake giving up my father's ranch." "Never," she said fiercely. "I would rather live in a tent with you than in a palace with anyone else." They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans. James showed her around the property, explaining his hopes for expanding the herd and maybe growing some vegetables in the spring. He was passionate when he talked about the ranch, his eyes lighting up in a way she suspected they rarely had at his father's place. As the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, they returned to the house. James built a fire while Sophia explored the kitchen, finding supplies to make a simple dinner. It felt natural, working together in the small space, and she caught herself imagining a lifetime of evenings like this. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Our future," she said, leaning back against him. "All the evenings we will have together, all the meals we will share, the children we might have someday." "Children?" His voice held a smile. "Do you want children? With you?" "Yes. 12 if you will have them." She laughed. "Let us start with one and see how it goes." They ate dinner by the fire, and Sophia realized how different this felt from the tense silence of Jacob's house. Here there was warmth and laughter. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts, dreams for their future. James told her about breaking his arm falling from a horse when he was 12, and she told him about her mother who had died when she was 15. "We both lost our mothers young," James observed. "Maybe that is part of why we understand each other." "Maybe," Sophia agreed. "Or maybe we would have found each other anyway. Maybe some people are just meant to be together." "I like that idea," James said softly. As the hour grew late, an awkward silence fell between them. They were alone in the house, unchaperoned and unmarried. Technically, they should not even be in the same room together, let alone contemplating spending the night under the same roof. "I will sleep in the barn," James said, breaking the silence. "It is not proper for me to stay here with you until we are married." "James, that is ridiculous. It is freezing outside, and we are getting married tomorrow anyway." "I know, but I want to do this right. I want to give you every respect, every honor. You deserve that." Sophia stood and crossed to where he sat. She took his face in her hands, looking into his eyes. "You are a good man, James Ortega. Better than I deserve. But I'm not letting you sleep in the barn. We will be married tomorrow, and nothing is going to happen tonight that should not. We can trust ourselves for one night." He covered her hands with his. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." In the end, they compromised. Sophia took the larger bedroom while James made up a bed on the floor in front of the fire. It was not ideal, but it was better than the barn. They said goodnight awkwardly, and Sophia retreated to the bedroom. She lay awake for a long time, listening to James moving around in the other room. She thought about how different this night was from the previous one, when they had been strangers forced together by circumstance. Now they were choosing to be together, and the difference that made was everything. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Sophia woke to the sound of James building up the fire and the smell of coffee brewing. She dressed quickly in her best dress, a deep green wool that brought out the color of her eyes. She did not have anything fancy enough for a proper wedding, but it would have to do. When she emerged from the bedroom, James was waiting, dressed in clean trousers and a white shirt. He had shaved and combed his hair, and he looked so handsome that her breath caught. "You are beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "So are you," she replied, and they both laughed at the absurdity of calling a man beautiful. Miguel arrived mid-morning with Reverend Thompson, a portly man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He did not ask many questions about the hasty wedding, though Sophia suspected he guessed there was a story behind it. "Do you have a ring?" the Reverend asked James. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "It was my mother's," he said quietly to Sophia. "I want you to have it." Tears pricked Sophia's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Standing in front of the fire with Miguel as their witness, they pledged their lives to each other. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them man and wife, James kissed her gently, reverently, as if she were something precious and fragile. After the Reverend and Miguel left, promising to spread the word in town, Sophia and James were finally alone as husband and wife. "I cannot believe this is real," Sophia said, staring at the ring on her finger. "2 days ago, I did not know you existed. Now I am your wife." "Regrets?" James asked, though his tone was teasing. "None," she said firmly. "What about you?" Instead of answering with words, he kissed her again, deeper this time, with passion and promise. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I think that answers your question," he said, making her laugh. They spent the rest of the day settling into their new life together. Sophia rearranged the kitchen to her liking while James went out to check on the cattle with Miguel. When he returned at dusk, he found her making bread, flour dusting her hands and nose. "I could get used to coming home to this, sure," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind and kissing her neck. "Good, because you are stuck with me now," she replied, turning in his arms to face him. That night, They truly became husband and wife in every sense of the word. James was gentle and patient, and Sophia felt cherished in a way she had never experienced before. As they lay together afterward, his arms wrapped around her, she finally understood what it meant to be loved completely and unconditionally. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Sophia threw herself into making the house a home, sewing curtains and cushions, organizing and decorating. James worked hard on the ranch, but he always made time for her, whether it was taking her riding across the property or simply sitting by the fire at night and talking. Word of their marriage spread quickly through the town and surrounding ranches. Some people were scandalized, but others were more understanding. Mrs. Chen from the restaurant became a fast friend, bringing over food and offering advice on everything from cooking to dealing with the harsh New Mexico climate. The one shadow on their happiness was Jacob. James had ridden to his father's ranch several times, hoping to talk, but Jacob refused to see him. According to the ranch hands, the old man had become even more withdrawn and bitter, working himself from dawn until dusk, and snapping at anyone who crossed his path. "He will come around," Sophia said, though she was not entirely sure she believed it. "He just needs time." "I hope you're right," James said, "because I hate knowing I hurt him, even if I would make the same choice again." Spring arrived slowly, melting the snow and bringing green back to the land. Sophia discovered she was pregnant in late March, and James was overjoyed. He became even more protective of her, trying to stop her from doing anything strenuous, despite her protests that she was perfectly capable. "Our baby is going to have the best life," he promised, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I am going to make sure of it." "The baby already has the best life," Sophia said, "because it has you for a father." One evening in early May, as they were finishing dinner, there was a knock on the door. James answered it to find Miguel standing there, looking nervous. "Sorry to bother you, boss, but there is someone here to see you both." James stepped onto the porch, and Sophia followed. A horse stood in the yard, and astride it was Jacob Ortega. He looked older than she remembered, his face lined with exhaustion. He dismounted stiffly and stood looking at them with an expression Sophia could not quite read. "Father," James said carefully, "what brings you here?" "Can a man not visit his son?" Jacob asked gruffly. "Of course. Please come in." They moved inside, and Sophia offered Jacob coffee, which he accepted. They sat at the table, an awkward silence filling the room. Finally, Jacob spoke. "I have been doing a lot of thinking these past few months," he said, "about your mother, about the choices I made after she died, about the kind of father I have been." "Father, you do not have to," James began, but Jacob held up a hand. "Let me finish. I was not a good father to you after your mother died. I was so lost in my own grief that I forgot you were grieving too. I taught you to work, but not to live. I showed you how to build a ranch, but not how to build a life." He turned to Sophia. "When you chose James over me, I was angry. I felt betrayed, but I have come to realize that you did me a favor. You showed me that I was trying to solve the wrong problem. I do not need a business partner. I need to learn how to be alive again, how to be human instead of just a rancher." "Mr. Ortega," Sophia said gently, "I am so sorry for the pain we caused you." "Do not apologize," he said. "You were right to choose love over security. I wish I'd been brave enough to do the same when I was young." He looked at James. "Your mother would be proud of you, son. You have her courage, her ability to lead with your heart instead of your head." "Father," James's voice was thick with emotion, "I did not want to lose you over this." "You have not lost me," Jacob said. "If you will let me, I would like to be part of your life again, part of both your lives." "Of course," James said, standing and embracing his father. "You are always welcome here." Jacob stayed for dinner, and the conversation gradually became easier. He asked about the ranch, about Sophia's pregnancy, about their plans for the future. When he finally left as the sun was setting, promising to visit again soon, Sophia saw tears in James's eyes. "Are you all right?" she asked, taking his hand. "I am more than all right," he said. "I have you. I have our baby on the way, and now I have my father back. I have everything I could ever want." Over the following months, Jacob became a regular visitor. He was not demonstrative or overly emotional, but he showed his love through actions rather than words, helping James expand the ranch, bringing gifts for the baby, teaching Sophia about the land and its challenges. Sophia gave birth to a healthy baby boy in October. They named him Thomas Jacob Ortega, and when Jacob held his grandson for the first time, Sophia saw the hard old rancher wipe away tears. "He has your mother's eyes," Jacob said to James, "dark and full of life." As winter approached again, almost a year after Sophia had first arrived in Albuquerque, she reflected on how much her life had changed. She had come west expecting nothing but security and survival. Instead, she had found love, family, and a place where she truly belonged. One evening, as she rocked Thomas to sleep while James sat nearby mending a bridle, she thought about that snowy night in James's cabin when he had kept the fire burning all night to keep her warm. That had been the beginning of everything. The moment when two strangers had begun the journey toward becoming a family. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, noticing her smile. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," she said. "How different my life could have been if you had not been at that saloon that night." "I was thinking the same thing," he admitted. "If the storm had not come, if I had not offered you shelter, if any of a dozen things had gone differently." "But they did not," Sophia said, "and now we are here together with our beautiful son and a whole life ahead of us." James came over and kissed her forehead, then bent to kiss the sleeping baby. "Together," he agreed. "Always together." Years passed, and their family grew. Thomas was joined by twin daughters, Emma and Grace, and then another son they named Daniel. The ranch prospered, and James proved to be as skilled a rancher as his father, though with a gentler management style. Sophia became known in the community for her kindness and her beautiful needlework, which she sold in town to help supplement the ranch income. Jacob remained a constant presence in their lives until he passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72. He left his ranch to James with the stipulation that it be kept in the family for future generations. James combined the two properties into one of the largest spreads in the territory, but he never forgot the lessons he had learned about balancing work with love and family. On their 20th wedding anniversary, James took Sophia back to the cabin in town where they had spent that first night together. It was early winter, and snow was falling gently, coating the world in white just as it had that fateful night. "Do you remember?" James asked as they stood in front of the fire, now older but no less in love. "I remember everything," Sophia said, leaning into his embrace. "I remember being terrified and exhausted and alone. I remember a stranger offering me kindness when I needed it most. I remember sitting by this fire and feeling for the first time in months that everything might actually be all right. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," James said, "and I remember knowing even then that you were going to change my life." "Did I?" she asked, though she knew the answer. "You saved my life," he said seriously. "Before you, I was just going through the motions, working and existing, but not really living. You taught me what it means to truly live, to love completely, to build a life rather than just a ranch." Sophia turned in his arms to face him. Her hair was threaded with silver now, and lines had formed around her eyes, but James looked at her like she was still the young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach 20 years ago. "I love you," she said, as she had said countless times over the years, but never tired of saying. "Thank you for warming me by the fire that night. Thank you for warming my heart every day since." "Always," James promised, kissing her as snow continued to fall outside, covering the world in quiet beauty. "Always and forever." And as they stood there together, warmed by the fire and by their love, Sophia knew that coming to Albuquerque had been the best decision she had ever made. She had left Philadelphia looking for survival and found so much more. She had found home, she had found family, and she had found a love that would sustain her for all her days. Their children grew and had children of their own, and the Ortega Ranch became known not just for its cattle, but for the family who ran it with love and integrity. Thomas took over the operations when James grew older, but James and Sophia remained active well into their 70s, offering advice and watching with pride as new generations continued the legacy they had built together. On a cold winter evening, 45 years after that first snowstorm, Sophia and James sat together on the porch of their ranch house, wrapped in blankets and watching the sun set over the land they had built their life on. Their great-grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the crisp air. "Do you have any regrets?" James asked, taking her hand in his as he had done thousands of times before. Sophia thought about her life, about all the joys and sorrows, the challenges and triumphs. She thought about the scared young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach into the snow, and she thought about the woman she had become, strong and confident and deeply loved. "Not one," she said firmly. "Not a single one. You?" "Only that I did not meet you sooner," James said, squeezing her hand. "But I suppose that is not really a regret, since we met exactly when we were meant to meet." As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast New Mexico sky, they went inside together, ready for whatever time they had left, grateful for every moment they had shared. The fire was burning warm and bright, just as it had on that first night, just as their love had burned warm and bright through all the years of their marriage. And when people in Albuquerque told stories about the old Ortega place, they always mentioned James and Sophia, the couple who had found love in the middle of a winter storm, whose devotion to each other had built not just a ranch, but a legacy that would endure for generations to come.